Hello, Exemplar Ministries family. This is your girl Silva, and we are here building excellent leaders, health to wealth. If you want to be a blessing to the ministry, you can cash app us at Exemplar Ministries. And the topic for today, in which we are continuing on to part 2, God Faith. And we will be coming from Genesis, the 7th chapter. And the subtopic will be divine judgment and salvation through the flood. So previously, I spoke about the history that led up to the point of God being so upset with humanity and his works that he made a decision. And that decision was to cleanse and purify the earth of all inhabitants. However, God saw righteousness in Noah and his family, whereas God decided to spare them. So God informed Noah to prepare for the flood that is coming. And because Noah believed and obeyed God's instructions, here we are today in Genesis, the 7th chapter. So let's look at Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 1st through the 5th verse. Now in Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 2nd verse, every clean beast, male and female, by 7, and not clean beast, male and female, by 2. I thought that was an important thing to make note of. As well as Genesis, the 7th chapter, and the 3rd verse, which talks about the fowls, male and female by 7. That was how God arranged for things to be ordered for them to enter the ark. Now God also, in this verse 3 of Genesis chapter 7, gives his reason for doing this, which is to keep the seed alive. Okay, so God wants to keep his works or his seed alive on earth. Now, after Noah has done this, God lets him know that in 7 days, which is today, 1 week, God will cause it to rain on the earth. And this is for 40 days and nights, according to Genesis, the 7th chapter and the 4th verse. Then God mentions his reason for the flood, which is to destroy every living substance from off the earth. Now, substance in this particular area means a thing. Okay, so he was going to destroy every living thing from off the earth. What a mighty God we serve, you guys. So let's look at Genesis chapter 7, verses 6 through 9, where Noah further puts his faith in God the more. In verse 6, Noah was 600 years old. He was 500 years old in Genesis, the 5th chapter, 32nd verse, when he had his sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Shortly after, God gave him instructions about the flood. Wow. That is a whopping 100 years, you guys. From the time that he had his sons up until the point of the flood, that was 100 years. Wow. So at this point, everyone that God told Noah to have entered the ark, that's what happened. That's what he did. Now let's look at Genesis, the 7th chapter, verses 10 through 16. As now the flood has began. This happened around, and this is an estimate time, September or October the 2nd of 1976 BC. Now, there is something significant about the flood. Here are a few things God has brought to my attention. 1, according to Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 10th verse, was the number 7, which in this particular verse, it means the end of the old and yet the beginning. Number 2, in Genesis, the 7th chapter and the 12th verse. The number 40, which was broke down to me as the numbers 8, 5, and 40. Now, in this particular verse, the meaning was God's grace for a new beginning multiplied while preparing. So 8, we know, represents the new beginning. 5 is grace. And 40 represents cleansing and preparation. Number 3, Genesis, the 7th chapter, the 13th through the 16th verse. 2 by 2 went in, male and female. This is prophetic. God was showing how he wants to keep things or life alive. Number 4, Genesis, the 7th chapter, verse 16. God shut him in, meaning God moved to protect Noah and his family while separating them from the judgment and those outside. Talk about dual protection, you guys. Can you imagine being on this ark, or what a lot of people call a boat or a box, being in this huge ark, and your family is safe? Everything that you knew is safe, all the way down to the creatures that God wanted to protect is safe. And he shuts the door where nothing can enter and nothing can exit. And imagine this. You hear screams, people knocking on the doors and walls and possibly windows, and they could not get in. Imagine that for a second. Imagine how Noah and his family and their wives felt to hear the cries and pleas of others, and there was nothing that they could do about it because God had the final say. So keep that in mind, you guys, when you go to do things in this life, even when it pertains to what you say and even your thoughts and what you ponder upon the table of your heart. God has the final say. Moving forward. So let's look at Genesis, the 7th chapter, verses 17 through 24. So here we find that this is the period the flood increased. So here's the picture. After Noah and the animals entered the ark, the flood began. The rain poured down for 40 days and nights. The waters rose, lifting the ark off the ground. Now, imagine this. The waters flooded the earth so much that it lifted this ark, or this big box or boat, off the ground 22 and a half feet, which equates to 15 cubits according to Genesis, the 7th chapter, 20th verse, King James Version. And soon every living thing on the earth was submerged. Oh my God, you guys. Even the mountains were covered, and all creatures that were on land died. They died, you guys. This was 22 and a half feet of water. I want you guys to think about how deep that is. Most of our pools today equate to around a few feet of water. Not that deep, just deep enough for us to swim in. What do you guys know of that's greater than 22 and a half feet of water? I would think a sea. That's what I would think about. So the flood waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days. So after 40 days and nights of rain, that water remained for another 150 days. So that concludes this message for today. What a mighty God we serve, you guys. Stay tuned for next Sunday at 6 a.m. prompt. We will post again every Sunday, and you're going to get part 3 of God faith pertaining to the flood. Thank you.